You moved the headstones.
Okay. You what? You built houses on the grave. You didn't move the graves, but you moved. Yeah, yeah.
We're there.
Okay. All right. Well, of course, we always have a main topic here on the show, and this show, I wanted to go over something very interesting. I've been meaning to talk about with everyone here, and this is a story about some people in Poland. They're excavating out there, and they found 400 vampire graves. So, literally 400 graves of supposed vampires, and they found interesting things that what they did to these grave sites. So I'm going to go over that and everything. And it's a very interesting story. Before we get into it, do you believe in vampires?
In the traditional supernatural live forever kind of thing?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right.
Do I believe there are blood-sucking, no good weirdos out there? Yeah, probably.
Okay. I would agree with that, right? Maybe there's always a truth to some myth, right? There was always some weirdo or something weird that was happening.
Yeah, and I think in our day and age, we can sit there and look back on history and go, okay, somebody did something, and that's how that legend got started.
Someone bit someone on the neck and just ran away.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Or someone they thought was dead and then woke up, because that happened a lot, right? They
exactly.
Because they're in a coma, right? And people in comas, they could wake up a year, 6 months, even years. So maybe they woke up a week later and they're like, "Hey, what?" And they came out,
decided to drive a wooden stake through their heart, and
yeah,
okay, there we go. Now they're dead.
So, yeah. So while overseeing the expansion of a road in Lozino, Poland, so this is in Poland, archaeologists came across a mass grave near a church. But this wasn't just any graveyard. Upon closer examination, the archaeologists found that several of the dead had been treated as vampires. So, I mean, that's a lot of people. 400, over 450 bodies discovered near the church. Many had been apparently dug up and reburied. Some had been decapitated and had skulls between their legs. Others had coins placed in their mouths, and 20 to 30% had bricks arranged alongside their head, arms, and legs. So this is what people used to do if they thought something was wrong with someone, right? Either they had some disease or they couldn't explain it, and they literally thought these people were vampires, so they decapitated them. This is pretty crazy, right? What if you were out there digging in your backyard and you found this? This would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, amazing isn't quite the word I would use, but
well, okay. Like if you're into like,
I would be more in the line of you moved the headstones.
Okay. You what? You built houses on the grave. You didn't move the graves, but you moved. Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah. It's a good movie, by the way. But the fact that there were 450 of them by this church, so they must have had some epidemic or something was going on with these people, that there was so amount of them. And I'm not sure if we're gonna get into that, but I'm not sure if they really knew at the time what they were dealing with. But yeah, this is a picture of one of those bones or bodies that they found, where they would put the idea was that they decapitate their head, and then they would put them down by their legs, and then they put those bricks, so the vampire can't pick up his head and reattach it. In addition, the archaeologists also found a huge mass of loose bones. So here's a picture of that. According to the Polish site, so they just found another pile of bones. The lead archaeologist explained that the church near the graveyard was first built in the early 18th century, then expanded after 1945. At some point, bones were deposited into the ossuary. So, like, this was going on for a while. So they were just finding vampires and then burying them here. But the vampire skeletons are certainly the most fascinating find. So there's all kinds of weird stuff in this church. So I mean, we've had our own little, we've had the witch trials here in the U.S. So I wonder if the and maybe it wasn't documented, but maybe there was some type of thing where um, people thought the whole town was just run by vampires
Right.
and evil CEOs, and they just took them all out. What do you think?
Well,
Like
yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Was it just like, somebody came into this town and was just like, these people are weird. They're vampires. Kill them all.
like a Dust Till Dawn.
Yeah, kind of thing. Yeah, it was just kind of a weird. But I'm curious. I mean, they thought they were vampires, but yet don't vampires like crumble to dust in sunlight?
So it's it's interesting you bring that up. Now, I've before we go forward, I've seen other photos of the same in Poland where um they put something around their neck like a blade or something when they bury them, because their theory was if you decapitate the person, the vampire, they cannot become a vampire, they cannot be a vampire any longer. So if they bury them and they're locked in and they wake up, they would, chop their head off for them. So that's another thing that they do over there, or they did. Um, so we discovered so here's another quote from one of the people there. We discovered examples of belief in the dead returning from the grave. So in Poland, the myth of vampires is not like you got bit and then you're like walking around being a vampire. You would die, then would be almost like a zombie. Then you would
Hmm.
become a vampire. So that when we see zombie movies now, we even think about you shoot them in the head or you take their head off and they're done, right? So that's interesting. That's an interesting thing that is even in the 18th century Poland, that they thought that if they cut off the head of something evil, that it would be no more. So yeah, it was believed that if the member of the deceased family was dying shortly after the funeral, he or she could be a vampire. Therefore, after burial, the grave was dug up, and then deceased head was cut off, which was then placed in the leg. So that's another thing they did. So instead, if you're worried about your family member becoming a vampire, you would automatically cut off their head in the beginning, so they wouldn't become one. One of the skeletons was a woman who had been decapitated and reburied with the skull of her child. So that's pretty sad. But like, so they're either being cautious or they do the Eeyore one. So that's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you look and you go, what can like a mass hysteria, a weird social persuasion do
Well,
to people?
we kind of saw that a few years
Yeah,
ago, right?
that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, it's like we,
Yeah.
you
So
look at it and you go, man, that's weird. Well, what did we deal with just a few years ago? It's
exactly,
like,
they could have been chopping our heads off. Who knows?
right. Well,
It's but it's just interesting, right? That
mhm,
even back then in the 18th century, if something was different, odd, no one could explain it. They freaked, and then they decided, or they were concerned. I don't know. I don't know if I should really say it's freak, but they were so concerned that they thought it was a vampire or a zombie that they had to do something to prevent it. That was pretty
right.
extreme. And I mean, we see some of that now, years ago, or a lot of time through history. Um, it's something that we can't explain right away. Humans tend to go to the extreme on some cases. So they also found coins. The coins found in certain skeletons' mouth was meant to seal their soul and give them passage to the afterlife. And now a lot of cultures did this, either in the eyeballs,
Mhm,
or they put money on their chest, or just in Egyptians they put a lot of gold or trinkets in their
right.
tomb. So a lot of people do this, and that's crazy. That's interesting that all across the world, that regardless of what culture you come from, that seems to be a thing that we do. According to Poland's first news, at least one of the coins dates back to 1846, which makes sense as the anti-vampire practices were popular in the 19th century. So there you go. There was a lot of anti-vampires. Like maybe they had a maybe there was like a huge cult or some crazy thing. Indeed, the vampire graveyard full of decapitated skeletons and skeletons with coins in their mouth. is part of a larger anti-vampire tradition reflected in the Polish literature, folk tales, and earlier archaeologists' research. In fact, the site notes that some of these ancient practices have been preserved in certain religions to this day. So there you go. Like
Hmm.
it's just something that they're very big on. They're very big on. We don't want any vampires in Poland.
Right.
So if you are a vampire out there and you're one of the glittery ones, you aren't expected.
Yeah. Don't go to
Don't
Poland,
go.
I guess.
Yeah, don't go to Poland. So here's a artist rendition of what they thought a vampire was. So where did these vampiric customs actually come from? According to the Agent Oranges, many cultures conflated people suffering from tuberculosis with vampires. So yeah, that makes sense, right? That disease makes you cough up blood.
Hmm.
And some people and pale,
Right.
become very pale. So you could look like death walking. Because the sick were often pale and thin and coughed up blood, they were thought to have the vampire curse. So maybe these people weren't. Maybe they were just diseased, like they had some.
Right. It was.
Couldn't explain.
Mhm.
Yeah, in Poland, however, legends around vampires could be a bit different. Agent Orange Origins reports that vampires were thought to be more like zombies, and I mentioned that corpses that came back to life. Thus, people believe that decapitating the skeletons, feared to be vampires, could prevent them from rising from the dead. So there was a combination there. They were vampires or they were zombies. And it's
Hmm.
interesting because, again, like I mentioned, if you look at all the movies, pop culture, comics, that's how you get rid of a zombie. You
Right.
go for the head, right? So,
Yep.
um, but yeah, I thought this was kind of funny. It reminds me of the Dancing Bones cartoon. I
Mhm.
can't remember if that's a Silly Symphony or not, but
Yeah. Silly Symphony.
that's what that looked
Skeleton
like to
Dance.
me. Yeah. Let's see here. Vampire legends date back to at least the 11th century. So, people have been afraid of vampires for a while.
Mhm.
Sometimes the living world would be decapitated subject vampires, like in the Polish vampire graveyard, but sometimes they would go to a step further and ensure that the vampire didn't rise from its grave. They would hammer a metal rod straight through the skull. So it's either that or they did the neck thing, like I mentioned
Mhm.
too. Hopefully now the dead of the Polish vampire grave, dug up at least twice, will finally be able to rest. So the people who dug them up are hopefully going to give them a proper, send off or something to do something nice for them. I don't know, but this was in the news quite a bit ago, and it was a big find because you don't normally come across a 400, 400 people gravesite that isn't marked, like you said, like poltergeist type of style. So,
Right.
well, there you go. Some vampire lore and history for you. You didn't think you'd get that on this show, did you?
No, when you invited me, we arranged the date. I was like, "Oh, cool! It's the show before 4th of July. Cap. It's going to be real cool. It'll be patriotic. Vampires."
Well, I can give you this.
America! Yeah!